Let's start learning today, and we'll continue where we left off last time in this preparation for the night of the Seder. Okay, well, we ended up last time with two major themes of the Leil Pesach. One was the idea of the transition from monotheism, from paganism to monotheism. B, the idea of freedom. Those were the two major themes, which we know are the most important things about the Seder. I'd like to now go back to the psukim, if you don't mind, which you have in your sheet. If you have your sheet, we'll go to, I'm going to deal with the psukim dealing with what we call the four sons. I'd like to understand what these psukim really are and what are we doing in the night of the Seder with these psukim. So let's first go to if you have your sheets on source Daled, the first pasuk that deals with this is Vayaki Omra Lichem Bnechem, when your children will tell to you, Moha Avodah Azot Lachem, what is this service to you? Now, this is a pasuk in Shmais Perek Yud Beis pasuk Chavav. It's dealing with the day for the 14th of Nisan. It's dealing with the day that you will be Makav, you will offer the sacrifice of the Korban Pesach. And this has nothing to do with the night of Pesach. The pasuk dealing specifically with the 14th day in Nisan, the day of the Akravas HaKorban, when we bought the Korban of Pesach. And it says that it doesn't say your children will ask you, rather your children will tell you. Very okay, now I understand that. And your children will tell you, what is this service to you? When we say that someone asks in a rhetorical way, he's actually saying a statement. It says ki yomru. What does that actually mean? It doesn't say yishaluchem b'nechem, as the pasuk says in other places. If you go to source Hey, you have there in pasuk Yudad, Oyakish alcha bincha. Your children will ask you. You go to source Vav, in the Dvarim Perek Vav pasuk Chav, Kish alcha bincha macha. Your child will ask you. Yet here it says, Ki yomru lachem b'nechem, they will tell you. Well, it's obvious. Anybody, we're used to this already. When people ask when they state a question, not ask a question, they're actually challenging you. Are you an idiot? Yes. You know what I mean? What kind of thing are you? It's an equal saying you are. This is basically they're challenging you. You have a child which is stating a statement in a rhetorical question. He's actually giving a statement. Okay, he's challenging and he's saying, "Hey, what's this for you?" Okay, that's what it sounds like. In other words, that's probably this is a child challenging the meaning of Hakravas and sacrificing the Korban Pesach. Who is this child? What we're talking about? A child who doesn't ask, he's not inquisitive. Inquisitiveness is a healthy thing. It should be encouraged. But when a child does not ask, but rather challenges, because he already has. He's not. This is what I remember. Footler once told me. He came in to the base measure. He sat with me for about almost 2 hours, and we were talking about education. He tells me, you'll see, they're going to ask you a lot of questions in life. I'll give you a tip. Before you answer, make sure the question's a question. The question isn't really an answer. You always have to remember when he comes with when he really has a decision beforehand, he just wants it ratified or something like that. That's not a question. Okay? Only answer questions. So this child here isn't asking a question. This child has an answer. This is Narishkeit. What are you guys doing? It's a waste of time. Says, what is this thing for you? That's what he's saying. I can understand by reading the pasuk. This is a child which is a product of the Egyptian culture. Let's remember, we're talking about the Dor Yotzei Mitzrayim, and you're going to have children. Now, their children, wherever they'll be born, they'll be born in a pagan culture. Let's say this is the Dor Yotzei Mitzrayim. When you have children, they grew up still. If you recall, last time we learned together. The paganism was the inner personality of almost all the Jews at the time. If you recall the Perek in Yechezkel, plus the Perek Chav that we learned last week, how it was really hard for God to get the Egyptian paganism out of the Jews. It took 2 heavy years in the desert until there was finally stopped bickering. Recall that how the Jews really did not want to be part of a monotheistic community. And so this is their children. What do we answer to a child like that? So it's interesting. The Torah has compassion. And the Torah says, "V'amartem," you will state, "Zevach Pesach hu LaHashem." This is a sacrifice of skipping to God, Asher Pesach, which skipped al Batei Bnei Yisrael. He skipped over the houses of the Hebrews, b'Mitzrayim. B'Nakfo et Mitzrayim, when he afflicted, he plagued the Egyptians. V'Esbatenu Itzil, and he saved us. And what do we answer to the child? We said to the child, listen, we and the Egyptians were in the same situation, as we discussed at length 2 weeks ago. How we were totally assimilated culturally and everything outside of it, keeping a basic ethnic, 20% of the nation, keeping an ethnic identity. But as far as religion is concerned and culture is concerned, we and the local Egyptian were friends, relatives, went to the same church. We believed in the same 11 major Egyptian gods at the time. I mean, there were 11 of them, actually 12. Egyptian gods at the time. And therefore, the major one was Ra, if you really want to know, and according to Chazal, also Aries, the constellation of Aries, which is what you call Mazal Taleh. Okay, so these are the Ra is the sun god, and Aries is the idea of the constellation, which means sheep. So we were all doing the same. And this child asks you, why are you all of a sudden giving a korban to this god, Yud, with the hay and the vav and the hay? Why are you so, what is this monotheistic behavior? And what do we answer? He says, we were like you. We were all the same thing. We were totally assimilated. And there was no reason, if God wanted to destroy the Egyptian paganism, why would he save us? Yet he did. He did. Actually, not because of our nice brown eyes. As we mentioned last time around in the name of the Ramad, he did because he wanted a nation which would live, breathe, talk, and walk his monotheistic credo. And because we're the grandchildren of Avraham Avinu, as the Rambam discusses at length, if you recall, again going back to last time's shir, at the end of Perik Aleph Hilchos Avodah Zarah, Me'avos, the love of our forefathers on the oath that he had sworn to them, he made us into a monotheistic nation. So we're really thankful for this. We thank him for skipping over us and giving us this chance of extricating us from, literally, as the Gemara says, we were a fetus in the womb of a cow. He took us out of a goy mikerev goy. Literally, he took us out of a nation to create a nation of his own. And that's what he did. And so we're thankful. What is the answer? The answer is, I understand you have a pantheon of gods. And you have you don't understand why all of a sudden we want to sacrifice to this God, Yud K Vav K. Well, the answer is because it's a Thanksgiving. This is our turkey. This is our turkey dinner. This is our thanking God for skipping over us. And the child understands that. We're not going into a religious dialogue. We're trying to explain that you may believe in other beliefs, but you have a normal sense of morals, and Thanksgiving is one of them. Hakar Satov. And that's basically the answer that the Chumash gives to this child, which is challenging and etc. This is actually a very nice thing. And the nation, hearing this, they bowed down and they prostrated themselves. Rashi brings on the spot, they were said, thank you that we're going to have children. Now, do you understand what this is saying? This is saying they knew they were going to hear, they were told via the prophet, Moshe, that they're going to have children which are going to challenge their monotheistic beliefs. Children which are still rooted in paganism. But at least they'll have moral ethics or feelings, and they will understand the idea of Hakarat Tov. And they were thankful for that. It's the story of anybody's life. And this is I find this an unbelievable, a nice way of doing things. Yet when in the Haggadah, they took this poor kid and they had this terrible reaction to it. And now that Haggadah is a Bechilta of Rabbi Yishmael. You can go to source Bet. And it says over there, going into if the last source on the right column here, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8th line, and you have Rasha Mahu Omer. Now understand, why is he called a Rasha? I just told you why. Because he said, Ki Yomru Lachem. We'll just wipe out some of the Perushim in the Haggadah. He doesn't ask, he challenges. That's why he's the Rasha. He's the evil person, which has basically, he's a pagan. And he's not really part of the celebration of monotheism, as we discussed at length last week, 2 weeks ago rather. He's the Rasha. Ma avoda zois lachem, which is exactly that. Now here the Baal HaAgada, which is Rabbi Yishmael, actually, Rabbi Yishmael Kohen Gadol, this is the Tana, the counterpart of Rabbi Akiva, Rabbi Shimon ben Gamliel. And ma avoda zois lachem, and he adds an idea, lachem below lo. It's for you, not for him. Right, because he's actually a pagan. But the focus is not because he said lachem. The focus is on how do we know he's a Rasha? Because the pasuk calls him Yomru Aleichem. That's why he's a Rasha. That will answer a few of the questions. What's the difference between lachem, eschem, all these other weird pirushim in the Haggadah? It's very simple. Ki Yomru Lachem means the child is not questioning, is challenging. That's why the Rishmol calls him a Rasha. But what in that challenge he mentioned that he's not part of your group. And he says, Lachem, what is the service for you? It's your service, equal, not for me. Lachem v'lolo. Ulefisha otzitat someone a cloud, because he said, listen, this service of this korban is not for me. Kafar be'ikar, he basically denied the major principle. Major principle of what? Because he made the idea, he walked out of the celebration of monotheism. Take this all in context of 2 weeks ago shir. We can now understand this mechilta. He basically walked away not from the korban. The korban symbolizes the return to monotheism. That's the korban pesach, that we slaughtered the sheep, which was the embodiment of Aries, the constellation of Taleh, and therefore, which is the constellation which is dominant at this time of the year, April. Nisan, and we slaughtered that Avodah Zarah. He says, "Ma Avodah Zarah, yes, I'm not part of this, but what is it for you? Why are you part of that?" Obviously, he denied the major principle of monotheism. You must dull his teeth. It's a nice way of saying, don't answer. You retort back and you blast him. And what do you say? The pasuk says that I did God for this, for the Korban Pesach, for the mitzvos. God did to me when I left Egypt. Li v'loy lecha, I left. You would not leave. Ila ita sham laita nigal. You would not have been redeemed because you were probably part of the 80% of the people that died in Egypt because they were not redeemable. He basically told them, you're such a jerk. You're one of those 80% that died in Makkah Choshen. This is the answer. Now I ask you, what is this Tana doing? He's taking a pasuk, the same personality, yet the Torah actually thinks that this child we should be talking to him and try to explain it first to morals and ethics. Before you jump to do theological study, you realize he is challenging. He's not open to theological discussion, but you work with him at where he's up to. As long as he has a moral fiber, you can start by introducing religion through morality, through ethics, which is a very, very healthy way of education. We don't start learning the guide perplexed with a young child. We start learning how to be a mensch. My mommy used to say, "La'olam yehei adam." First be a mensch, afterwards yer shamayim. Then you can be God-fearing, but first be a human being. And that's what we're telling him. We're telling him first, "Bazai a mensch." God skipped over us. He was nice to us. Say thank you, and he accepts that. And yet over here we have a boy, which says the same Avodas Zarah, and all of a sudden Rabbi Yishmael second temple, Tana was killed by in the Hadarian decrees. Okay, he was one of the Asar Malchus. He comes and says, "No, the kid must be stifled," and told him, "You're no good, and you would have died there." What's happening here? Is this Pshat? Is this Remez? Is this Drush? Is this Side? What is this? This is nothing. This is against everything found in that pasuk. What is this Tana doing? Let's go to the next child on this table. The next pasuk we have, and this actually even worse. This is the pasuk is not even talking about the Seder night. The Tana has taken this child, which is talking about something on the 14th of Nisan, imported him to the Seder night, and put another answer in our mouths. Taking the pasuk totally out of context. And next source. Next source is source Hay. This is a very important source. Perik Yud Gimel and Shmois pasuk Gimel. Moshe said Elam to the nation, Zachor, you must remember, Esayom Azeh, this day, Asher Yetzatem Mitzrayim Beis Avadim, this day that you left Egypt in the house of bondage, Ki Bechozik Yod, you must remember Ki, because it was the strong arm equals with force, with Maipsim and Osos, Hotzi Hashem Eschem Mizeh, God took you out of this. Therefore, chametz should not be eaten. So we know this pasuk is there first and foremost to justify the issur of chametz. Remember this day, and therefore chametz should not be eaten. This is one. This also is a first of all, the mitzvah zachor. I'd like to show you something very interesting. It is that pasuk continues in pasuk ches. Part of that story, what comes out of that zachor, the gadtala bincha bayom ahule mor, and you will tell your child on that day. On that day means on the Tesvav of Nisan. Ba'avur zeh, because of this, we point to the matzah and the moror, and we say because of the commandments, for example, like the matzah and moror. It doesn't mean the matzah and moror specifically. This is a Rashi on the spot, the name of a mechilta. In order that I should fulfill his mitzvahs, as for an example, the matzah and the morah, which are in front of us, Asa Hashem li, God did for us, Mitzaysim and Mitzrayim, when I left Egypt. Now, let's try to understand this. Part of memory is, what's the mitzvah? Is the mitzvah the telling, or is the mitzvah the memory? For example, you have a mitzvah of memory, and because of that memory, you must not eat chametz. Because of that memory, you must relate your memory to your child. So there are different versions or expressions of memory. It's a mitzvah which is primarily having a memory and using it by expressing yourself through refraining from chametz, by putting on tefillin if you really want to know. Actually, even by setting aside your bechor, your firstborn, are all part of the expressions of the mitzvah of that memory. It's a mitzvah which primarily is believed, it's in your heart, which has expressions. Now, this is explicitly found in Rambam. I want you to see this for a moment in source Aleph. In source Aleph, you have Rambam Hilchos Chametz U'Matzah Perek Zayin Halacha Aleph, where the Rambam writes, Mitzvat Aseh Shel Torah. It's a positive commandment of the Torah, l'saper, to relate b'nisim v'niflois, to the miracles and the wonders shena'asu la'aviseinu b'Mitzrayim, which were done for our fathers in Egypt. V'leil chamisha aser b'nisan, at the when do we tell this story? At the eve, the night of the 15th day of Nisan. So you would expect to bring the pasuk v'yigadita lebincha, and he doesn't. Shene'emar, and here he brings the pasuk, Zachor et hayom azeh asher yetzatem miMitzrayim. By doing this, the Rambam is saying that the mitzvah is Zachor, remember, and the V'yigadita, the telling part, is nothing more than what? In a form of how to express that memory. Kemo shene'emar Zachor et yom HaShabbat. What is he inferring here? Here is referring to something really very interesting. Normally, when I tell you remember, does remember mean doing something, saying something, or just having a mental image? Well, that's a Mefursha Sifra in Bechukoisai. And the pasuk Zachar et asher asa lecha Amalek, and then ends with Lo Tishkach. The Sifra writes Zachar Yachal Belev. I'm saying something orally because you don't have the source in front of you. One would have thought that normally the word Zachar, remember, is a mitzvah in your heart. Equals you got to conjure up an image. I would have thought that's enough for this Amalek story. It says no, but the pasuk says Lo Tishkach. You must not forget. So already we've taken care of your memory by we're telling you can't forget equals you must remember. Why are you adding the Zachor active? Ela bapeh. So the word Zachor normally means balev, means just conjuring up an image, because it's superfluous due to the fact that there's already a Lo Tishkach. Therefore, we take for granted that the Zachor here means bapeh. You have to say something. What's alluded here that the word Zachor normally does not mean the pet. It means belev. So what is the mitzvah of Zachor et hayom hazeh sheyatzatem miMitzrayim? Is it belev? It should be, because there's no added pasuk. It would seem to be that only if you have a child which doesn't ask you questions, you must share the memory by telling it to him. What happens if you're there on your own? You remember. You don't have to say a thing. That's what one would normally have thought. And yet the Rambam said that's not true. And the answer is because there's another pasuk in Parshas Yisro called Zachar et Yom Hazeh Sheyatzatem miMitzrayim. Says Zachar et Yom HaShabbat Lekadsho. Remember the day of Sabbath to sanctify it, which means to make it special. People don't understand what they're saying. You're basically setting it aside. The Kadsho means set it up, see it as a special day. So the Kadsho could mean nothing more than, once again, a frame of mind. But there the Sifra writes, the Kadsho bivrocha. You have to actually say a benediction. Vatan la'alocha in Ritva, that the Ikadin in Ritva in Psachim, that midoraisa, biblically, it's not enough to remember Shabbos and to think about the Kadsho. You actually have to say a bracha. You have to articulate this thought by saying a benediction. It's bepeh. That's a din. That's Kabbalah Misinai, that the Zachar Yom HaShabbos the Kadsho is bepeh. So the Rambam says that somehow, for whatever reason it be, I'm not going into why we're not saying it till Shir today, that the Zachar at Yom Tzedchem at Mitzrayim is similar to the Zachar of Yom HaShabbos, and there it's bepeh. And therefore he believes that you always have to articulate whether you're telling your child or whether you're telling to yourself. And that's what he says. The Rambam continues. Talmud lomar v'yigadcha lebincha b'yom hahu leimor. What do we see in Rambam? The mitzvah is memory, and the fashion is by conjuring up a memory and relating it, whether relating it to your child or even to yourself. Now, the idea is it was a big nafkamina la'alacha, something we should be very careful about. The mitzvah is not to say. The mitzvah is to have a memory and then say. Memory, by definition, means the capability of conjuring up an image of the past into your present mental state. That's memory. Reliving a past. If hypothetically you never had it, you're not remembering, you're creating an image now. Is that memory? It's got to be a memory of the past which you are now bringing to the present. You left Egypt. This idea that b'chol dor v'dor chayav adam lirot et atzmo ki hu yatzav mitzrayim, it would seem to be is not just a halacha of Leil Pesach. I'm going to show it to you shortly. Every time you must always remember, that is the reason that we put on tefillin. That is the reason why you set aside your first bechor. That's the reason for not eating chametz for 7 days. There's a basic mitzvah of Zachos Yom Hazeh Shetatem Mitzrayim, which comes into a fashion of saying and bringing up that memory and relating it on the night of Pesach. Nafkamina is, the Maharal writes in his book, once again, this is something which I did not put in the sheets, I'm just going to tell it to you orally. He has a very famous book called Gvurot Hashem, the Maharal of Prague. In chapter 62, he asked the famous question, why is there not a bracha on Sipur Yetzias Mitzrayim? And the Maharal answers something which is very similar to a Rush in his Shuvos. He says the mitzvah, you make a bracha if the action is the end, not just the means. For example, there's a bracha on tefillin. We know that the action is, the mitzvah is to put on tefillin. This will help you remember Egypt. Why? Because you remember what's in the tefillin. You'll remember what the content of the tefillin is. It's all about Egypt and the tefillin. But the means and the ends at the end of the day,
is this
on the tefillin. If you put on the tefillin, you didn't remember, so you were mevatel the mitzvah say of Zachor, so Yom She'etzatem Mitzrayim, but you were kind of the mitzvah of Ukshartim Lo Yisrael Yadecha. But the mitzvah
what about it?
Is a mitzvah of Zachor is Yom Mitzrayim. You have to have a mental image, and you have to implant that mental image into your child's head. The speaking is nothing more than a means for an end. Should you just say the Haggadah and not see it as expressing the image in your mind? Should you tell the kid to read the Haggadah and the kid doesn't know what he's talking about? And those words are not part of a mental image. Lo asita klum. I'm going to read this in Maharal inside. Maharal writes, Kivan de ikar hadavar machshavat halev. The principal goal here is the thought. Tzarich la'avin ma she'amar. You must understand what's being said. V'im lo kain, and if you don't, lo havi midi. It is meaningless. It's a very important thing to understand. It's much more important to understand this in English and bring up a memory, a communal memory, a historical memory of what it means bondage in Egypt and how we're part of that historical chain, than just to rattle up the nusach of the Haggadah in Ashkenazis or whatever Hebrew you speak. That without thought is meaningless. Lashon the Maharal, Masha Amar v'im lo kain lo havi midi. It is meaningless activity. Maharal therefore writes that therefore there's no bracha, because the bracha is only if the speaking was a means and an end of its own. But the speaking is nothing more a way of projecting a thought or planting a thought in a child's head. You know, just sitting there with the kid and to sing the man nishtana. Wow, yes, he'll say, and he'll rattle off all the nice stories. Nothing will be in his mind. You wasted the evening. It's an educational experience of planting images in people's minds, and by enhancing the image in your mind by also doing that. That was the Maharal explains. That's why there's no bracha. It's a bracha on a mitzvah, which is basically machshava. There is no bracha. Kriyas Shema. Of course, there's a mitzvah of Kabbalas Ol Malchus Shamayim, which is machshava. But the mitzvah is to read the parsha of Kriyas Shema. If you weren't Makabel Ol Malchus Shamayim, but you read Kriyas Shema, you were Makayim the mitzvah. Not the way it should be done, but you were Makayim the mitzvah. There's a mitzvah of Amira. Okay, Masha'en came when it comes to the Haggadah, without the speaking is nothing more than a medium. It's a means. This is Shitas Maharal. It's especially the Pashto Teretz, and this is basically Das Rambam. So that's why the Rambam said the mitzvah is the Zachor. I want us to remember that it's a very important halacha. The mitzvah is a memory. That's what we're supposed to be doing. Once again, what has happened to the night of Seder, as we discussed last night, it's really gone to other places. We're not focusing on what we should be doing. We're asking odd questions and buying too many Haggadahs. Just learn the Chumash. Okay, so here it says, and you will tell your child, what did the Baal Haggadah, what did Rabbi Yishmael do here? He called this kid She'ena yodea lishol. Okay, fair. That could be. It makes a nice way of saying if he's asked, of course you're going to talk to him. And if he doesn't, you will tell him. Granted. So this part makes sense. But then go further. The Pasuk Yud Aleph, which is in the source there, which is found, as you know, in your tefillin. When God will bring you to the land of the Canaanites, as he swore to you and your forefathers, and he will give you that land. You will pass over all those who are first coming out of the womb to God equals firstborn. And all the firstborn, first extricated of the womb of animals, livestock rather, that you will have, which are males, Hashem. Is you must bring, first of all, pet the rechem, the firstborn of an animal, you bring it to a korban to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Pet the chamor, and the firstborn of a donkey, Tivdeh said that must be, you can't exactly bring a chamor to the mizbeach, so you redeem it with a sheep, with a lamb. The imlo tivdeh, should you not redeem it with a lamb and then bring that lamb as a korban, but after you behead this donkey, and also I want number 3 in the list is first we have bchor behema, we have bchor pete chamor, and then finally number 3 is bchor adam, also the firstborn of a man. But of your children, tivdeh you must redeem. Okay, 3 mitzvahs. This is all part of the idea of Zachar et Yom Tzizcha Me'eretz Mitzrayim. Vaya, it will come past. Ki yishalcha bincha yitshad will ask you machar, in the future. Rashi there, the Mechilta there. Machar means in the future. Sometime. This is the kid which sees these. I once saw this. I once saw it over in class. I'll never forget this. The first time I saw this pidyon peta chamor thing. I don't understand where some customs come from. I'm always afraid they come from some gypsies in Romania. You go the pidyon haben. You take a child. He doesn't have to be there. You simply give the kohen the money and, make the bracha and goodbye. That's really all that's there. Okay, somehow I remember coming to a pidyon haben here in Eretz Yisrael, and they put this child on a silver platter. God reminds me, I don't want to say something, okay? Okay, a silver platter. And they put there full of jewelry. Now, why would they put jewelry, the poor kid there? And then they add bags of cube sugar and garlic. God help me. Poor kid. And I asked, what is this for? Because this is not in Torah, not in Nevi'im, not in Ksuvim, not in Gemara, not in Rishonim, not in Rambam, not in Shulchan Aruch. Where is it from? I think it developed somewhere in Hungary or Romania. I don't know. I never knew where these customs are from because they have no source at all in Torah. At all. Moses will come and wake up. He will not recognize this. He will say, what religion is this? It's something close to mine. Anyway, so they do this, and they bring him on a silver platter and the kohen. Okay, they make a whole ceremony of it. Sometimes I didn't do it. I'll tell you right now. I did it like a litvak, like the Bishtet Rambam. Anyway, so at the end of the day, this is already quite interesting to see how it's done. And then in Har Nof, they had a Peter Chamor. Unbelievable. They had this little donkey. They dressed it up in silks. And they put gold necklaces on the donkey's neck. And they covered him with gold and silver. And I'm looking at this. And they did a pidyon. They said, this lamb is instead of this donkey, etc. They didn't behead it, thank God. They didn't do that. Can you imagine a kid going to Har Nof? They dress up this donkey with jewelry, etc. They probably put garlic and sugar all over his back. And then they axed it. What would you do? I'll tell you exactly what I did. My jaw dropped. I says, what the oomph is this? So I looked at this pasuk as the most normal reaction. The guy says, your child in the future is going to see this pidyon peta chamor or this arifas chamor, beheading a chamor. He's like, what's this? He's puzzled. Mazos, is this someone which is a tam or someone which is amazed? Let's be honest. Is this a simpleton, or he simply sees something which is quite perplexing and amazing? He can't figure it out. I said the same reaction. I don't think I'm a Tom, to be honest with you. And I'm not a simpleton. And I felt the same way when I saw this donkey full jeweled up with gold bracelets and wearing silk. It really looked like comical. Okay? So that's the pasuk. The kid reacts in a normal way. Mazit. Is this Judaism? And Marte love, you will tell him, yes, Bechozik Yad, Mitzrayim, Beis Avadim, and God, Pharaoh didn't want to serve, he didn't want to let us go, and God basically skipped over, killed all the firstborn, and didn't kill ours, the same thing. And that's why I sacrificed this Peter Rechem Ascharim, B'chol B'nai Avdeh. That's in your tefillin, by the way. Okay. This to me is not a Tom. This to me is a child which sees something which makes no sense. But the Tana in Mechilta took him to somewhere else. Look again at source base. It's really funny. You go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6th line from the bottom going up. Tam Mahu Omer. Mazos. First of all, he transported him to the night of Pesach. This kid is in Harnof seeing a Pidyon Petach Hamor in the middle of Tammuz, and he just transported him to the night of Pesach. This pasuk has nothing to do with the night of Pesach. It's a child which encounters a Pidyon Petach Hamor. What's it got to do with the night of Pesach? He asked, what is this beheading a donkey? And the answer is, we behead the donkey because he's holy, because of Yitzias Mitzrayim, the B'chayros. What do we answer? V'amarte love b'chozik yod yotzion Hashem mitzayim beis avadim. Is that all that the pasuk says? No. The child asks, "What is this idea of the firstborn of a donkey?" And we start telling him the whole din of kedusha's b'chayros. What did the Tana do? He imported him to the night of Pesach, and he gave a one-line answer without really dealing with the real question found in the Chumash. The Chumash is, why are we redeeming a donkey? And you're telling me because the pasuk tells, and therefore we skipped over the firstborn, and this is the firstborn, and therefore I sacrifice it to God. That isn't even mentioned. What is the Tana doing? What are these Arba Banim? What is this man doing? He is not saying pshat in the pasuk. He's taking questions out of context. What's happening here in this Arba Banim business? And then the final one is what we call the Chacham, which is source Vav in Dvarim Perik Vav Va'eschanon. And here there's a beautiful, beautiful piece of Chumash which really we should learn and see. Ki yishalcha bincha machar. It will come to pass in the future that your son will ask you. This is not a challenging child. This is an inquisitive child. Ma'idut. What are the statutes? V'chukim and the laws of mishpatim. Asher tziva Hashem Elokeinu etchem. Now let's look at the context and understand. The child is born machar. He's in Eretz Yisrael. He's walking on the seashore, I don't know, near Nahariya with his father. Says, Dad, you were a little kid and you were at Sinai. You remember Moses and he commanded you. So I know, you know. I'm a second generation. You told me. Did he command me or did he command your generation? He commanded your generation. He commanded mine. He commanded you people, and now we know that we're commanded. So the language of the word eschem makes so much sense in the Chumash. I'm trying to diffuse all these speeches. It's very simple. Eschem means, yes, who did he command? Did he command you? No, you didn't talk to you. He spoke to you, to Daddy. Daddy was at Sinai. So what exactly are the statutes and the laws that God commanded you people at Sinai? What is he asking? Is he asking, if the question is informative, what did he command? Well, the answer would be, take out 20 volumes of Talmud Bavli and start reading it. That's not what the question is. Let's understand the question. I say this because I experienced this myself. But first I want to see the answer, and then we'll understand what the question is. You will tell your child, we were slaves to Pharaoh in Egypt. And God took us out of Egypt with a strong hand, which means with nisim and niflos, as we explained in previous year. And God placed indications, otot, if you recall, umoftim, and proof of his existence. Gdolim, they were very big. V'ra'im, they were very bad for the Egyptians. B'Mitzrayim, b'Faro, b'chol beitol einenu. We witnessed these otot and these moftim. Rotano otzimisham, and he extricated us. What for? Why did he take us out of Egypt? Very important pasuk for all people, specifically if you're planning to be in the Golah. Just want you, Laman Havi Otanu. The purpose of taking out of Egypt was in order to bring us, the Tet Lanu, to give us, Et ha'aretz asher nishba la'avotenu, the land which he had sworn to our forefathers. The purpose was that. Then he says, just to be in Israel, no. The idea of being in Israel is Vayitzavenu, and he commanded us all these laws. What for? Because he brought us to the great land of Israel, because this is the place where it must be done in the perfect way. And we've been commanded basically all these mitzvahs. For what purpose is that? It says, the Yira'at Hashem Elokeinu, in order to develop a sense of awe in front of God. This the Rambam Amar Nevuchim in the chapter before the last elaborates how living a Torah lifestyle instills into a person a sense of constant God awareness, which generates constant sense of awe. If you really live, breathe, and talk your religion. The purpose of the mitzvahs is to get a goal. The goal is to live with the consciousness of God awareness, which generates awe. Everything leads to something. We were taken out of Egypt to come to the best land for that, of God awareness, Israel. And in that land, the purpose is to do mitzvahs. And the purpose of the mitzvahs is to live with God awareness, which generates a sense of awe. The Taiv Lanu. This will be good for us. Kol hayamim, all the days, this will give us life and sustenance. In other words, we will have a meaningful existence. God gave us a purpose and meaning of living a life of God awareness, which within awe, by giving us the land, and in that land, giving us the laws of behavior, which will generate this God awareness and yira. Utstaka tialanu. Utstaka doesn't mean charity here. It means also like another pasuk in Bereshis. It means, and it's the right thing. Tzedek. Utstaka tialanu. It'll be the right thing for us. Ki nishmor lasot et kol mitzvah azot, that we will heed to do all the commandments B'fnei Hashem Elokeinu, in front of God our Lord, kasher tzivanu, as He commanded us. What's the answer and what's the question? The question was not what are the laws. The question is, why are we religious? Why are we keeping these laws? I still remember asking that to my father. Walking in the street, after shul, went after Ma'ariv. Still remember, I was a young kid, 9, but in those years when a lot of people were not religious and their parents stopped being religious because of the Holocaust, and we were one of the few religious kids around. I remember in those days there were 4 or 5 women in all of Chicago which covered their hair after marriage. My mom, thank God, was one of them, but it was rare. People walked away. Orthodoxy was dwindling, conservative and reform was skyrocketing. Even less, people just walked away. I remember asking my father, why are we religious? Why are we religious? He wasn't there for you. He wasn't there in Auschwitz. He wasn't there in Majdanek. Why are we religious? I remember asking this question. Not going into it, my father answered me. It's not time for today. But I just want you to know this is the question of this child. The kid's going to walk with his daddy one day in the street, Machar, and he's going to ask, why do we keep mitzvos? That's what the question is. It's got nothing to do with the night of Pesach, nothing to do with Cyprius Mitzrayim. He's asking a basic theological question. Why do we do this? I know it's a commandment, but why do we care? It's interesting what the father answers. He doesn't say, what do you mean? We do it because we do it. No. He doesn't do that. He explains that the whole idea, we reintroduced the monotheism through the 10 plagues. As we discussed last time around, we were extricated from paganism and brought into monotheism. And the whole purpose was to come to the best land forward, which is Israel. And in that, to live a lifestyle of Torah mitzvahs, which will lead us to God awareness. Great teacher, this Rav Adler. All this is to live, to get a sense of Shivisi Hashem, the Negdi Summit. This whole lifestyle, this whole being in Eretz Yisrael, for all this is conducive. It's a means towards an end. To be Yareh es Hashem, to live with a sense of awe and God awareness. And this is the right thing to do. Because that we witnessed in the 10 plagues, that the truth lies in the monotheistic God. And if this is what he wills, it's the right thing to do. It's basically saying that which Maimonides describes in Hilchos Tshuva, Perik Yud, Oseh et ha'emet, mipnei shehu ha'emet. You know why I do this? Because it's the right thing to do things which are right. That's what you're telling the child. This is literally a profound theological question and a beautiful answer saying that our theology, the platform of our theology, starts with our reintroduction to monotheism through the plagues of Egypt, everything we learned last time around, and thus it's the right thing to do, because this will lead to a life of constant God awareness if we do it right. And if we're not doing it that way, obviously, I guess we don't follow the manual. But if we follow the manual with its culture, we would be living a sense of God awareness. And Shivisi Hashem, the Negdi Summit, wouldn't be the one Ramah that no one fulfills. And this should be the one Ramah that everybody fulfills. And this is what it says here. And what did the good old Tana Rabbi Yishmael in Mechilta do to this poor kid? A question asked on the board on the shore near Nariya and Chziv in some day in Tammuz or in the French Riviera, for all I know. Why are we religious? And he gave him a beautiful answer about theology. And all of a sudden, what does he do with him? Chacham Mahu Omer. Look at this one in source Bays again. Go down to the 5th line. Chacham Mahu Omer. It should be Eschem. And why they wrote here Isanu, I don't know. What the oomph is he doing? What's it got to do with the night of Pesach? Hey, that's not the answer. The kid wasn't. This Tana seems to take that question and give it a new interpretation. It doesn't mean why you're religious. What exactly are the laws of the night of Pesach? And the answer is, I'm going to tell you all. So you start by saying the last Mishnah in the 10th parak of Psachim, which the Mishnah is, Ein maftir and achar Pesach afikoman. We don't eat dessert after the Korban Pesach. Basically, it's a nice way of telling him, finish with him except the 10th parak of Psachim. That's the answer. Afat Psachlo Ein maftir achar Pesach afikoman. A nice way of saying here, learn Mesech parak of Psachim. And that's the last Mishnah. That wasn't the question in the Chumash. This isn't the answer. What is the Tana doing? It is clear from this Tana of Rabbi Yishmael, he is not explaining, it's not Pshat, it's not Remez, it's not Drush, it's not Sod. What he's doing is something very interesting. This is a Tana, not telling us what God says, but actually giving us educational advice for the night of Pesach. And he's a very dated man. It's Rabbi Yishmael. That's the name of the book. Mechilta de Rabbi Yishmael, Teachings of Rabbi Yishmael. He's a Second Temple period man. He's giving you educational advice. He's taking, we know the mitzvah is Vigata Labincha. We have to relate the story to our children. He says, well, there are 4 biblical characters of children. He's taking biblical typology biblical characteristics and exporting them freely to the night of Pesach. There are 4 types of questions about theology dealt with. And theology is not the issue of the night, according to Rabbi Shmuel. The issue is, what we do today, the Shibud, the Geula, and all those other things. But I'll take the 4 types of questioners, and he implants them into the night of Pesach. Only one of those psukim deals with the night of Pesach. And I will point out what kind of questions they would ask at the night of Pesach, which is not what the pasuk says. And I will tell you what is the appropriate answer for these children today in the year that I am alive, Rabbi Yishmael. This is a dated piece of educational advice. It is not pshat, it is not remez, it is not drush, it is not sod. So don't try to reconcile this with the scripture. This is not explaining scripture. It's using scriptural personalities and writing your own theme, your own story, and putting their own story in their mouths. That's what he's doing. This is the Tana dispensing educational advice. He's on a Torah Masorah convention. That's what he's doing. He's giving advice. And this is the advice he gives. He takes the Chacham, and obviously he doesn't think the theological discussion is the night of Pesach. Otherwise, he would simply say the way it is. No. He thinks he's talking about the dinim of Chag Pesach. So in the Chag Pesach, the Chacham doesn't ask theology. You have to learn with him. Okay. Then he says there's a child called a Russia. And that Russia in the Chumash isn't talking about the night of Pesach, but that same Russia comes to the night of Pesach. And I take the pasuk which the Russia talks about the Korban Pesach, and I go for everything that we're doing tonight. And he basically says, well, the Russia in my time, we don't answer morals and ethics. We simply say, you're a jerk. Why? What's the difference between the biblical Russia and the Russia at the period of Rabbi Shmuel? I say this because I can put my fingers up to heaven. This may be right for his time. It is wrong for our days. Because what does he say? Let's remember the period in which he is. The period in which Rabbi Shmuel is Bayis Sheni. If you know your history, you know that basically with the beginning of the return of Ezra and Nehemiah, when basically Aristotle's prime student Alexander conquered half the world at the time, basically paganism was in decline and philosophy came into being. Language of the Rambam in Hilchos Avodas Yom Kippurim, Bimei Bayis Sheni Tzatz Haminut. Heresy, not really believing in gods or a supreme God, which is your guide and direction, is what would be the signature of the period. Yes, the Greeks had gods, but they were basically a disjointed, immoral group of ruffians on the Olympus. They lived with violence, incest, etc. They did not look at the gods as paragons of purity, truth, beauty, but rather they were dangerous powers which had to be dealt with and appeased. No one looked to Zeus or Jupiter, whatever he was in Rome or Greece, for morals and ethics. He was living in incest with his daughter Minerva, which is Venus. Morals and ethics, man looks for within himself. The great world of Aristotle's Ethics. Great book, by the way. Not by the way, it's an important book to read. Okay? Yes, these are very important things which we have to know. At that time, man stopped looking up to heaven for truth, because there was no truth in heaven. In heaven, there were only crazy powers on the Olympus that we had to appease. Truth, meaning, and purpose was found within man himself through him exploring philosophically morals and ethics. Man was no more a believer of gods at all. He was not a pagan. He didn't believe in anything but man himself. Oh, he knew there were powers that he appeased. Okay. But he didn't look for meaning and direction. That child is a different child than the child of the scriptures. Child of the scriptures is a child which believes in meaning and direction from above. Just he doesn't understand why we have to have this one God called Yud and the Hey and the Vav and the Hey. We have quite a few others which we can relate to. He's a man which lives with morals and ethics about correlative to gods. The word God is not foreign to him. So we answer, you're right. You may have other gods, but this one did us a favor. And that's a logical answer to give to the biblical challenging child, what you call the Russia. But the Russia of the Temple period is a child infused in Greek philosophy, which is totally assimilated. He's a Hellenist child. He's already grown into the Roman world, which is even worse without going into particulars. And this child now simply doesn't think that God, there is a God of meaning and purpose. God just means terrible powers which have to be appeased, but they're basically terrible people. They don't do favors to people. He doesn't believe all that anymore. All he believes in is man and man's meaning and purpose. The answer of thanking a God would not be appropriate in the Second Temple period. This is a heretic. This is basically the one saying, you guys are crazy, don't believe in anything. Here, his answer was at that period of time, Hakez, Shinav, dull his teeth, tell him if you don't believe in anything, you would not have been redeemed. I hate to say it. I don't hate to say it. I know it. Since this is not Drash, Soid, Remez, or Pshat, it's only Rabbi Shmuel's educational advice to the Russia at the time. I think that today's Russia is different. I think today's Russia, we should revert back to the answers given in the Chumash. Today's Russia is already a person which, we don't have any more real apikorsim. No one's a philosopher. At the moment, we're all just a bunch of Bali Taiva. The world of brains has ceased to exist. You know what I mean? Their brain, I don't know where it went. Their existence starts from Belton down. Taiva. Sometimes I think, you know what I mean? They have a kafia, you know, they put a gartel to divide between your seichel and your taivas. So I think the people today they should put the gartel on their forehead like an Arab kafia, because their taivas are already here. There is no head. No one's thinking. Thinking is a hard thing to do. Hurts. So this is what's happening. That child, you don't tell him Hakez Shino. That child, you start talking to him, you know, tell him about morals and ethics. Don't start with theology. Just tell him about morals and ethics and menschlichkeit, and slowly but surely bring him back to God. So I just want you to know that, because we're all going to run a Seder, and that's something which has to be explained. Because this approach found of Rabbi Shmuel is dated. The basic thinking behind this, I know it sounds a bit reformish, but it's the truth. It's a ritva. The ritva in his chidushim on Godesh Shel Pesach, found in the Chidusha Ritva and Psachim, Moseder of Cook, there's a Pirush or Oruch of the Ritva. He already points out, he tries to stick it to the Psukim. I'm not going to start dealing with that there are two types of Rishoyim. He discusses the Russia of Egypt and the Russia which came later. Differently, not at all what I said, but the different approaches he sees as the possibility of seeing the two different Rishoyim, and therefore each one is a different answer. That, thank God, I was machab to him. But what after I said is a totally different approach. I suggest you read the Ritva, and you make your choice of what you think is more sound. Okay, so this is what's happening here. Then we have the Tam. So instead of dealing with the Bchira, he simply says, Ma zois about what's happening Pesach night. Again, he's exported a big character into a new world and asking a totally different question. And we answer a different answer. We don't talk about Bchira. The biggest thing is the Chacham. The Chacham, he says, he's asking theology. Rabbi Shmuel thinks the major theme of the night is not the theology, but rather the story of Egypt. He thinks that's the major part of the story of Egypt, which is what we do today. And therefore, he transforms those psukim into questions about the night of the Pesach, and the answer is a totally different answer than the Chumash gives us. He is not explaining psukim, he's importing biblical characters, putting a new type of question and a new type of answer, which he finds appropriate. for his time into their mouths. It would seem to be from this Mechilta that he thinks that the primary issue of the evening is not theology, but rather simply telling the story of Egypt, which counters everything we learned last time around. It counters Rambam, where the Rambam clearly writes that the primary story must be the story of transition from paganism to theology, to monotheism, and he focuses totally on Egypt. But there's a Tana, his counterpart, which argues with him. And that is Reb Shimon Bar Yochai. It's a machlokas Reb Yishmael and Reb Shimon Bar Yochai. If you can go to source Ches in the Sefer HaMitzvos of Rambam, you will see in the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10th line from the bottom going up. The Lashon Mechilta de Rashbi, this is another Mechilta. The first one was a Mechilta of Reb Yishmael. This is a Mechilta of Shimon Bar Yochai. Shimon Bar Yochai was a younger Talmud of Rabbi Akiva. Rabbi Akiva was a friend of Rabbi Yishmael. She brings the pasuk Michal shene'amar ki yishalcha bincha. Since the pasuk at the night of Pesach says, if your child will ask, Yachol, I would have thought, Im yishalcha ata magidlo, should he ask you? You will tell him. V'im lav, but if he doesn't ask, ein ata magidlo. Tamud lomar, v'igadta lebincha. You must tell your child, now let's look at these two psukim. The first pasuk he mentions is Ki Yishalcha Bincha. What pasuk is that? That's not a pasuk of Leil Pesach. That pasuk is the pasuk of the Chacham. Ma'edus Bachukim Bamishpatim Asher Tziva Hashem Elokeinu Eschem. That pasuk isn't talking about the night of Pesach. That's talking about a child asking, why are we religious? Basic theology. And what does the Medrash say? Shimon Bar Yochai writes, I would have thought that unless the child brings up theological dilemmas, we should not introduce him to them. We should not introduce to him the complexity of religion as to why we're religious. Don't rock the boat unless he asks. There are such people that believe in that way of education. I totally don't. But this is what the Mechilta de Rashbi says. We would have thought we don't rock the boat. Yachol, I would have thought. Im yishalcha, if the child asks, Ma edus v'achukim ha'mishpatim, ata magidlo. V'im lav, if he doesn't ask, ein ata magidlo. This is not a question for the night of Pesach. That pasuk has nothing to do with the night of Pesach. It's ki yishalcha bincha machar. It's asking, we're on the shore of Naria. We're in the Riviera. I couldn't care less where we are. And he asked, Dad, why are we religious? And that he says, well, you read that pasuk, Veschanan says that what? We would have thought, don't rock the boat. Don't bring up, don't educate by introducing questions. And he says, no. Since the pasuk says that on the night of Pesach, the Igadta lebincha, equals, even if he doesn't ask, we introduce theological dilemmas. Therefore, that's what we should be doing every day of the year. What does Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai taught me? That the night of Pesach is discussion of theological dilemmas. And just as we see that the night of Pesach, we rock the boat, even if he doesn't ask. It also means when you have a child and you're somewhere, you're in Teaneck, you're in Los Angeles, wherever you are, you're educating a child, you must educate him with complexity and introduce questions in order to have answers. We don't wait for him to ask. It's usually too late. We must introduce the complexity of religion, explain when he's young why we do these things. Not what we do, but why do we do them? Too many kids walked away from religion because they always told what to do and never told why. I've had to deal with a lot of these type of kids. Today, it's getting worse and worse, specifically in communities which don't tolerate questions. I thank God constantly that I had a father which loved my questions. If not, I don't think I would have stayed around. And that's an important thing to know. I want you to know this is what Reb Shimon Bar Yochai says. Reb Shimon Bar Yochai believes that the ikar issue of Vigata Labincha is Ma Edus V'Achukam Mishpatim. Why are we religious? He argues with Rabbi Shmuel. Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai believes that the ikar avodah of the night is, again, theology, monotheism. Why are we religious? And from here we learn if we rock the boat on Leil Pesach, we always have to rock the boat. Rabbi Shmuel in Bechilta thinks that now the focus of the evening is not that. The focus of the evening is about Shibud and Geula. What is the Rambam Paskin? Both. As we learned last week, 2 weeks ago, the primary is Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai, theology, why are we religious? The secondary is Rabbi Shmuel, the idea of Shibud and Geula and Cherus. Okay, so this basically sums it up. We can say it again after reading all this together. There was a lot learned here. That Mascha B'Gnusu B'Sayim B'Shvach, we have to have two major themes of the evening. It basically means that the epic of the Exodus is the platform for our reintroduction to monotheism and what is God. And we must be able to bring up questions like, why are we religious? What do we really believe in? And why is it right to do it? This we learned from what we learned about God in Egypt. This is what the Chumash says. That's how the Rambam Paskins. We do a beautiful mix of Rabbi Shmuel and Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai. And that's, I hope we all have a kosher Freilich and Pesach, and we are successful doing this all year round. I mean, this is not just for the night of Pesach. Introduce your children and grandchildren to the complexities of life before they figure it out on their own, and then they get the wrong answers. Bye. Kol Tuv. A good Yom Tov. Wow. Bye.
Thank you. Thank you, Rebbe.
Thank you, Rebbe.
Kol Tuv. Bye.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you, Rabbi Blachman
Kol Tuv. Bracha v'atzlacha.
from
Hi.
Minneapolis.
How you doing? Wow. It's been a long time.
Been a few years.
Yeah, your beard gets bigger.
It gets whiter. How are your nephews? How are Zev's children doing? Are they still in Eretz Yisrael?
What?
Zev's, your nephews.
Oh, my nephew.
Say hello.
Yeah. I have quite a few. How's it happening? How's Minneapolis?
Well, everything's good. Everything's good.
Things are happening.
Things are happening. Judaism was moving forward. The whys and the wheres and the hows are all happening.
You worked hard for it.
You work hard. Okay, be well. Look forward to visiting you, Mitzvah Hashem.
Call too. Bye.
You only have good news from Eretz Yisrael. Should be peace.
For God's value. God's value. A great Yom Tov. See you all. Bye.
Thanks
Thanks a lot. Bye.